Israel, this is Makabi Israel. Today, I'm going to do a video on just my view about head coverings. There's no ulterior motive, not getting at anybody. It's just why I see it the way I see it. Because brothers, I had a talk with an Ak, and basically talking with him, I realized that we must know what each other follow and trust in, because there are a lot of doctrines that, like he said, there are a lot of doctrines that you can just deal with, and there are other ones that's just too extraordinary, like they're going way out of pocket, like forsaking Torah, like don't wear tzitzits, or the feast, we're not supposed to keep the feast. Even some say that keeping the feast is wicked. That's going way out of order. Now, it was okay that if you believe that you're not supposed to keep the feast, we can possibly deal with that. Possibly. But if you're saying the feast are wicked, it's wicked to keep the feast, and like, that's stupid, because the feast started in captivity. Passover started in captivity. Purim was in captivity. They had to fight for their lives. So these feasts were not just on time, always started when we were just chilling in our kingdom. So you have to be mindful of that as well. But I don't want to get too far into that. I just want to get into the head coverings for right now, because there's a whole lot of other videos I want to remake. So to start off, I'm going to start off with two verses in the Torah, which is Leviticus, Vayikra. These verses are what I call gat scriptures that, depending on how a person views a certain thing, the scripture may be opposing their view, and they must deal with that scripture, or at least interpret it into a way where it's understandable to their doctrine. But if it's not, if it's in complete contrary or opposition to the way they interpret or see or view something, then it's a gap. So there are some who believe that you must not cover your head when praying or prophesying. But I'm going to go into what necessarily is covering your head. What does it really mean? What is the difference between covering your head for a woman and a man, and things like that. So then going to Paul, according to the Torah, what will Paul really be saying? So we're going to go into that. But before that, we're going to go into Leviticus 10:6, and it says, "And Moshe said unto Aaron and to Eleazar and to Ithamar his sons, uncover not your heads, neither rend your clothes." I'm going to stop right there. Oh, well, it said, "Lest you die, and lest the wrath come upon all the people." I'm going to stop right there. So it's a critical thing for them not to uncover their heads, neither rend their clothes. Now, this is not Leviticus 21:10, where it says directly the high priest, because it says Lo Yipra et Roshu, which means do not uncover his head, or the high priest shall not uncover his head. But Lo Yipra et Roshu, the word et in Hebrew is a direct object marker. So whenever you see the aleph and the tav, and then that dash at the top, and then there's a word right next to it, and you're like, what the word is the dash for? So basically, it's a direct object marker, meaning et roshu, meaning we're directly talking about his head. So roshu means his head. So you're saying et roshu, directly his head, the high priest. So Leviticus 21:10 is just talking about the high priest, but Leviticus 10:6 is talking about Aaron, Eleazar, Ithamar, and his sons, really. A whole tribe of people, whole bunch of people. It's not just talking about one. So not only does the high priest cover his head, but everyone that's pretty much in the order of a priesthood, or of a position of authority, because the word rosh also means to lead or to guide. It can mean that as well, but that would be in the allegorical sense. But in the direct sense we're seeing here in Leviticus, it's talking literally about fabric, because the next sentence is, nor rend his clothes. So in Leviticus 21:10, you see nor rend his clothes, and in Leviticus 10:6, you see neither rend your clothes. So those are two similar keys to let you know that the context is strictly talking about covering yourself materially. And now we're going to go into Corinthians. What could Paul be talking about, seeing and knowing that those two scriptures in Leviticus, and even other ketubim, which are other writings that let you know that you must cover your head. Also to know, Paul was a tent maker, but the word tent was not necessarily talking about a booth that you dwell in. It was talking about talits that you put on your head when you petition. He made talits. For him to make tents, it would take a whole crew of people, and he was going about everywhere he went, and he made money by making talits. So he made the little talits that we wear on our heads You know, that's the Natalat Hayadim or the Talit. You know, the petition to cover your head with the Talit. You know, he stretched Psalms 104. That's the petition that we petition before putting on the Talit, and that's halakha. You know, and that is what you would find in the Siddur, not just the African Israel Hebraic Siddur from Rabbi Simon Altaf, but I looked in other Siddurs, and it talks about Talits putting on the Talits, which are called tabernacles or tents as well. And they were normally used when the temple was overrun or taken over by Gentiles, et cetera, et cetera. They would have a personal talit or tent for them when they would pray or petition. So that would be covering their heads, and they will also have another type of covering on. But we're going to get into that in a moment. So let's go to Corinthians 11, 1 Corinthians 11. We're going to break it down slowly and take our time with this so you won't think I'm twisting you up. You know, I want you to get what I'm saying, so I'll be repetitive, because being repetitive helps people to get things a lot of times, or rather helps people to see where I'm coming from, at least, that I'm not just saying any old thing and sounding foolish. Even if you still don't believe it, you'll know that I'm not sounding foolish at the same time still. But let's get into it. So 1 Corinthians 11, 1 through 16 is where I'll be going to. And start with 1. It says, "Be you followers of me, even as I also am of Messiah." Stop right there. Now that is going to be part of the context of, before we get into everything else, the part of the context is right here. Be you followers me, even as I also am of Messiah. Okay, verse 2 will twist you up, and it'll throw you off, because it just do a lot of, you know, blessed are you, beloved, in Jesus Christ Jesus. It'll throw you off because, you know, Paul does a lot of baruka, meaning he does a lot of increasing people, which is halakha as well. When you greet someone, you do the hands like this, both hands like this, and you say baruka taga dolaba, you know, yohewah, and then you baruch them, you know, the benevolent, the sovereign, you know, the commander of armies, you know, may he increase you forever. That's what you do when you greet someone and when you depart. So you'll see a lot of Paul doing the baruka, which is halakha, and you'll see that in there. So verse 2 is that, halakha, he's doing the baruka, or the baruch, the increase upon the people who's reading. So that will throw you off from the context a little bit. So you can read that on your spare time. So I'm not even going to read 2. I'm going to skip verse 2. So verse 1 says, "Be you followers of me, even as I also am of Messiah. But I would have you know." Now we're getting to it. So basically, follow me. Let's just pretend I'm Paul. Follow me. And I'm saying according to Torah. If Paul was speaking according to Torah, this is what it would mean. Okay, I'm Paul. Follow me as I follow Messiah. So this is talking about women and men. But I would have you know, while you're following me, while I'm following the Messiah, that the head of every man is Messiah. So the context is here. Head, the same word for head is the same word used in Leviticus, rosh, which also means lead, as we said, or as in the text says, it means to lead or to guide as well. You know, the head or the leader is of every man is Messiah, and the leader or the head of the woman is the man, and the head of the Messiah or the leader of the Messiah is Elohim. Now this is strictly the context right here. 1 and 3 is the context of everything else that's about to go forward when he goes from this sense and then go more physical with it about hair and stuff. So the context is the head of every man is the Messiah. That's every man, not a few, not just priests, not people that are not priests, meaning every man, Levite priests and everything, which is why I went into those 2 verses at first about the high priest and about the sons of Aaron, Eleazar, and Ithamar. Those are other men as well, so that's every man, not just high priest. So even if you did exclude that verse and you just use high priest, that still include that high priest in every man. So the head of every man is Messiah, and the head of the woman is the man, or you can, more, detail say her man, because it says the man. It's not saying, a man, like just any random man. No, the man, meaning her man. So the head of the woman is her man, meaning she's not supposed to have multiple different teachers and coverings. She's supposed to have one man that's her man that she's under, and according to how he governs her is how he governs her. That is why that says the man, not a man. So keep that in note. So the head of the woman is her man, or the man, which is the same thing. The man and her man is the same thing. He's not talking about many, he's talking about one. And the head of the Messiah is Elohim, or the Father, we can say. So the word head interprets as leader. So this is how we understand what head is here. The leader of every man is blah, 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 blah. So that's the context. Now let's move on. That we didn't brought the context out. Now verse 4 says, every man praying or prophesying having his head covered dishonor his head. Number one, what type of covering is he talking about? But we're not going to get into that yet. We're going to go into praying and prophesying. Praying is another way of saying asking or petitioning. Because when you say pray, it's kind of like not really given, too much detail. Praying and prophesying, asking and prophesying is pretty much goes into the same thing as vow. That's one context, as well as the context of to the Father. For instance, the example, if a man is being taught by another man who's a moreh, a rabbi, or just a tzadok, a nashim, or a right ruling man or men, then if he wants to petition them for something, or he wants to pray them for something, because you'll see that in the Torah too. He's like, I pray you, give me or lend me something this. The word pray will be there instead of the word ask. So the word pray is also mean ask. So in the sense of talking to men, a man shall not ask of anything of a man, or prophesy, which also means just speaking about the Torah or the Tanakh, having his head covered, he dishonors his head. So in that sense, it's saying he dishonors the Messiah, because the context is the Messiah is the head of every man. So praying or prophesying in that sense is talking about no man shall try to go into another man asking, can he do such and such for the Most High, before he go and do it. He just goes and do it. If the Most High tell him to do it, he does it. It's not like a woman, where if a woman, as an example that we have in the Torah in Numbers, or the Midbar, is that when a woman wants to vow a vow, it's up to the father or the husband whether or not he'll allow her to vow the vow. He can actually intervene and say, no, you're not keeping a vow. That is the context of, and the similarity of praying and prophesying, having your head covered, is that sense. Because a woman is not supposed to have her head uncovered in anything she does, whether it's praying or prophesying, or vowing even, to include that in the praying, prophesying, and vowing. A woman is not supposed to have her head uncovered. A man always give her the permission whether she can do this or that. And it sounds strange, but it is there. It's in Numbers. You can look it up. And so for men, a man dishonors the Messiah, trying to pray or prophesy, or trying to ask or prophesy by the permission of another man. And about petitioning to the Father, we are supposed to have our heads covered, as seen in Leviticus. We are to have our heads covered. It's not talking about fabric, meaning we are supposed to have something on our head. Even if you have a band around your head, like a bandana, or something like a toboggan like me, or a kufi, or turban, anything like that, that is considered a head covering for men. That is covering your head. So even if you cover your forehead and only cover it around and have the top open, your head is still covered. So in the sense of head covering, it didn't say, have, your forehead covered and the top open. It didn't say all of that. It just said, don't have your head covered, meaning nothing is supposed to be on your head at all. But there are cases where we see about turbans in the Torah. We see about the diadem. We see about the, different ways when the Messiah will come back. He will have the crown on his head. Things like that. We see that heads were covered, whether it was just around the top with the top open, or koofed out with a kufi or toboggan like I have on now. As long as it's all cotton and it doesn't cause your head to sweat, you can put it on. So that's what a head covering is for a man. Now, what a head covering is for a woman is actually a teshel. As in the Hebrew we call it, would be a teshel, a wrap, a head, what they would call head wrap, like a woman, you wrapping your head all up, like, that would be considered, not appropriate for a man, or veiling herself. not necessarily veiling her face, but if a woman veils all of her hair and her neck and her body, as the Muslims do or the Muslimas do, that is considered wicked, and that's feminine. You're not supposed to do that. A man's not supposed to cover his head like that. That is the feminine way. Another way, and we know that because the priests were to cover their head. They were not supposed to uncover their head. So how did they cover their heads? And that gives you the distinct difference of type of coverings that they're supposed to be covered. So that, and veils, of course. Men's not supposed to veil their face like that. That's only for women. But for men, they only supposed to have something on. They supposed to have something on their head. But it's not supposed to be like women. So in the context of what Paul is talking about, according to Torah, he's saying every man praying or prophesying having his head covered dishonors his head, the Messiah. But that's talking about the Messiah, not talking about fabric. But every woman that prays and prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, for that is even all one as if she were shaven. So we already know that the woman's supposed to veil or put the tishel on, and the men have kufis. That's already known. But having another man over top of you when you want to pray or prophesy or do the will of the Father or make a vow, you're not supposed to do that. That's dishonoring the Messiah, the head of every man. And if a woman does it without getting permission from her husband, or her man or her covering or her leader, then she dishonors her head, and it's just like being shaven. Okay, that is the context of that is going on here, because you go back to verse 3, and it tells you the head of every man is the Messiah, the head of the woman is the man, and that's the context of verse 4 to 5. And verse 6, it goes like this: for if the woman be not covered, basically keep the context, be not covered as in by a man, or the man, as verse 3 tells you, the head of the woman is the man. So if the woman be not covered by a man, quotes, let her also be shorn. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, which is the Messiah, meaning having another man over him, for as much as he is the image and the esteem of Elohim, but the woman is the esteem of the man. Now, the reason why I keep reiterating the head of a man is the Messiah, and when Paul is saying a man not supposed to cover his head, I'm saying a man is not supposed to cover his head about the Messiah and not fabric, because we always go back to Leviticus that the priests were not supposed to uncover their head. So he can't be talking about men not having on kufis or turbans or something. He's not talking about that. He's talking about the Messiah, because there are authority, discombobulations going on. Is men covering men, women covering women, women uncovered, going out there preaching and prophesying loose, just like we see it today on Facebook and all of that. Women, I don't need no man, and I just listen to many brothers. They don't have just one covering. They have that not spoken for, which links to Luke 16:22, as in you must have somebody to cover you, so that it goes beyond the grave. Why you need a covering. That's why the head of every man is the Messiah. So when we die, we're spoken for. He covers us. We are in his bosom, in his place. We're with him. Just like I said, Luke 16:22. Lazarus, when he died, he went into Abraham's bosom, or Abraham's house, until the Messiah came, died, resurrected. Now we go to the Messiah. Women need a man to cover them. They must not be uncovered, because if she's uncovered, then that means fallen angels are her covering, and when she died beyond the grave, that means fallen angels will take her and torment her. If not, then she will be like Eve or Chava with Adam and Chava. Chava went back into the bosom of Adam when she died. She did not. She went back where she came from. She went back to his bosom. So will the women go to the bosom of the man that she's covered by, just as the Messiah, who is the Father, or the Father is the head of him, he came forth from the bosom of the Father. Which is Yehukin in 1:18. He came from the bosom. Also Yehukin in 15, starting at verse 1. He said, I go prepare a place for you. In my Father's house are many rooms. The word house is interchangeable or allegorical or synonymous with bosom or the midst, M-I-D-S-T. In the midst or the bosom or in the light of the Father is many rooms, which he came forth from, which is the invisible, which links you back to Yehukin in 1:18. If you follow me, please follow me. You can rewind the videos and take notes. But This is what it's talking about head coverings. So, for a man indeed ought not to cover his head, which is the Messiah, for as much as he is the image and the esteem of Elohim, but the woman is the esteem of the man. So this is going on about whose order is whose now. That's why he's starting to go about, the woman is not without the man is the head of the woman, because it's about the order. It was never about the fabric. The fabric, yes, it goes with it. Men are supposed to cover and women are supposed to cover, but differently. They cover differently. So men are not supposed to be like women when they're coverings, that's known, and they're not supposed to have other certain authorities to cover them, which is why the Messiah told the disciples, you shall not rule over one another, which is also why Samuel said it was a sin. Samuel was displeased with them asking for a king, because the Messiah, Ben Yahweh, before he was called Messiah, he told Samuel, he said, they do not sin against you, they sin against me, in asking for a king when I am their king. They're not supposed to have anyone else over them. This is it's taking us back to the original way. So that's the context that Shaul is talking about, or Paul is talking about here, if according to Torah. So verse 8 says, for the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. This is why a woman needs a man to cover her, because she came from man. So this is why the woman, she must have a covering. And yes, every woman thinks that a covering is a husband or something, or some man that you're going to be having sex with. That's not necessarily true. Once a woman is born, she has a covering. That's her father. If her father's dead, it's her grandfather. If they don't have that, then it's her uncle. If not that, it's going to be her brother. If not that, it's going to be a male cousin. It's going to be immediate family. If not immediate family, it's going to be someone like a Rabbi Mori or somebody. And that is the point for the kindreds. It's actually according to Torah, as in the book of Tobit and Apocrypha. It is according to the law that a man must choose out of his cousins first before an outsider choose of his cousins to marry. That's according to Torah, and that's what it says in Tobit. Take her according to the Torah, meaning you have a right. He was telling Tobit that he have a right to marry his cousin, or his near kin, whether it's first, second, fifth, or whatever, no matter what, as long as it's not one of those Leviticus 18 ones, the sister and all of that. It can be a cousin and it can be a niece, but he has the right to marry his cousin before any other man. So that's why, it said that in Tobit. Marry her according to the Torah. It is your right to marry her. She is yours. She belongs to you before any other man gets her. So that is Torah. So this is going on here. So there must be a mandatory covering for every woman. If a woman gets married and her husband, is displeased with her, she's wild and violent, or if her husband dies and she's a widow, she must go back to her husband. She must go back to her father. If her father is dead, she goes to the priest. There's always a woman being covered here, and we see that back and forth all in the Torah. So check my time. All right, I have a little bit of time. All right, so I'm gonna do this verse 10, and then I'm gonna stop at verse 12, and then I'm gonna start another video. Verse 10 says this: for this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the Mount Akim. Now, this keeping it in context here. Actually, I might stop right here. But this is keeping it in context. All about the man is the head of the woman thing. Why is the man the head of the woman? And that the Messiah is the head of the man. It's all about the powers that be. That's the principalities and the powers in the air. That Paul also said that, we are warring against principalities, powers of the air. We're not really warring against flesh and blood. We're not warring against meat. We're warring against spirit, power, energies. So he said, for this cause ought the man to have power on her head because of Mount Akim. Now the word power, it also means God, or you will see the word God in the English scriptures, but the word God is really supposed to be power. That's the deception there. Whenever you read King James and it said, well, God said to this, it's really supposed to be power or powers, plural. That's what it's supposed to be. It's not just supposed to be God. That's something that they made up and put there. God really shouldn't exist. It should really be powers, to be more accurate. So when you read Yehukanan or John chapter 10 verse 34, it tells you that the Torah said that we are gods, but we shall die like men. Meaning we are power. We have authority. We have power and dominion in this earth, but we shall die like men. So it said, for this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the Mount Akim. So keeping it in context, the reason the man is The woman is for the man. The maid for the man is because the woman must have power on her head. The woman is the weaker vessel. The woman must have a man that is in the Messiah, who is his covering, over top of her. You know, so that she must have power on her head, so that the fallen powers won't just do whatever they want with her. Because of the Malachim. That's exactly what it says. Because of the Malachim. The fallen Malachim, to be more specific. Because they were the fallen Malachim were coming and taking the wives of the men, and they were marrying them. So the men was going to war with the fallen powers, and there was big old wars and stuff going on because of the fallen powers taking their wives and stuff. And Adam was one of them. They took Lilith. Lilith actually ran away to marry one of the fallen Satans, one of the 10 fallen ones. It was 10 of them, so it was 10 Satans, and one of them she went to marry, and she left Adam. So the other Malachim that were from heaven, that were the right ruling ones, that were not fallen, went to go try to get her back, and she was like, I ain't going back. So basically, that's what happened. They couldn't get her back, so she just left him. She left him, and for another Malach, you know, for a Malach that was fallen, and that's what's going on. That's why I was taking it in this context, because what happened at first about the fallen angels. This is why a woman must have power on her head. Alright, next video.